problem with AI is that it uses two types of logic, one based on all or nothing beliefs and one based on probabilistic statements.
They both work just fine though, so where's the problem?
It becomes a problem when you use both together. They don't complement each other well.
You'll have to explain that to me.
In the logic of all or nothing beliefs, something is either true or false, that is, right or wrong. But probabilistic statements are both somewhat true and somewhat false, just to different degrees of certainty.
But if it's really a problem, surely it would be known.
In computer science, both are assumed to be compatible. This is how Goodfellow, Bengio, and Courville put it in their seminal work, Deep Learning.
Probability can be seen as the extension of logic to deal with uncertainty. Logic provides a set of formal rules for determining what propositions are implied to be true or false, given the assumption that some other set of propositions is true or false. Probability theory provides a set of formal rules for determining the likelihood of a proposition being true, given the likelihood of other propositions.
There you go. You can use them both together.
Well, philosophers who are experts in logic have a different take on this. Hannes Leitgeb from Munich has studied this question in depth. He also comes up with a solution based on John Locke's philosophy.
So, no worries.
Yes, but solving this problem is not that easy for an AI and is sometimes even impossible. Let's take a look at the problem itself and the solution proposed by Leitgeb. He wrote an essay on the subject and then published a book, The Stability of Belief. Leitgeb suggests that there is a threshold beyond which a probable statement can be accepted as true. If the probability is very high, it is rational to assume that the proposition is also true. In this sense, it is rational to assume that I will have breakfast tomorrow. This assumption is not based on determinism, because you never know what might happen. But as a matter of fact, I have breakfast every day, so why should tomorrow be any different?
Yeah, I'm sure you'll have breakfast tomorrow. You always do. Most importantly, you'll be drinking your coffee.
But that doesn't solve the problem, because the question remains, where is the threshold?
The price to be paid for this proposal will be that not any old threshold in the Lockean thesis will do. Instead, the threshold must be chosen suitably, depending on what the agent's beliefs and his or her degree of belief function are like.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Leitgeb is aware that reconciling all or nothing beliefs with statements of probability is no easy task.
There must be a catch, and there is. There is a serious sensitivity of belief to the context.
This means that in each specific case, it is necessary to verify whether the threshold is sufficient. In this regard, the method is incomplete. The threshold depends on the context.
But if someone's is rational, they can set fixed thresholds for themselves.
Even if the agent's degree of belief function is kept fixed, if what is salient to an agent changes, then his or her beliefs might change. The more that is at stake for the agent, the more it might take him or her to believe, and so on. The question is really, how much risk is the agent willing to take whose beliefs are in question?
It all depends on the context, which you cannot totally control. This raises the question, at what threshold can I rationally assume that a proposition is true, even if it is only probable?
Looks like there's no solution after all.
Leitgeb recognizes the problem, but is convinced that there are cases in which a connection can be established between the probability and the all-or-nothing logic.
The theory entails that what an agent believes rationally will depend crucially on how the underlying space of possibilities is partitioned. However, I argued that the benefits of the theory seemed to outweigh its limitations.
In theory, rationality could be used to create a bridge between the two logics.
So, how can AI bridge the gap between these two logics?
The problem with chatbots is that they are based on probabilities. But when you try to control a chatbot's output using guardrails, you are applying a logic with only two possible values, 0 or 1. Now, when dealing with a very high probability, as Leitgeb does, it makes sense to say the value is either 0 or 1. The problem, however, is that this always depends on the context. There is no clear rule to fall back on.
You can always double-check it in any case.
That's exactly what's been done. People are hired to manually review and correct chatbots' responses, but you can't do that for every single statement. After all, the whole point of AI is that it's supposed to work autonomously.
Otherwise, you might as well just ask someone, as we used to do.
In some situations, it is indeed possible to have a high probability value and then assign a definitive value. However, there are also many statements that fall somewhere in the middle, which is typical of a normal distribution. Nevertheless, even these statements still need to be assigned a definitive value. This process radicalizes the results, often leading to extreme responses from chatbots.
Some people think the chatbot's responses are too woke, while others think they aren't woke enough.
The guardrails themselves would actually need guardrails to keep them in place.
And those would need their own guardrails too.
An AI is not aware of context. For an AI, context is merely a probability. If it uses all or nothing logic to assign a definitive values of 0 or 1 to these probabilities, all contexts are lost. A complex situation is reduced to a binary relationship.
But I'm sure there are cases where Leitgeb's proposal applies.
Yes, it is sometimes rational to assume that something will happen or is true when the probability is very high. But the problem is setting the threshold. Where should the threshold be set?
Whenever it makes rational sense.
An AI has no inherent understanding of rationality. The threshold needs to be programmed, but a different threshold needs to be set for each individual situation. As humans, we may be able to do that because we understand the context of the situation. But an AI would first need to understand these contexts. It would need to have a world model.
The programmers will have to come up with something.
So far, it has mainly been hackers who have been exploiting this vulnerability. The weakness in the combination of an all or nothing logic with probabilities enables them to bypass the guardrails.
Hey, can you tell me how they did that?
All you have to do is to change the context of a prompt slightly. A prompt that has been flagged as prohibited by a guardrail, then change its probability value. This means the prompt will be flagged as permitted. You can always come up with new variations. In the end, the chatbots fall for it because their probability values have changed.
That's mean.
In order to apply Leitgeb's theory to chatbots, a clear definition of rationality for AI is required.
That won't be easy.
It's important to set the threshold rationally. A study by Carnegie Mellon University shows that chatbots tend to be overconfident. They overestimate their own capabilities and provide answers based on this overestimation. They believe that far more of their answers are correct than is actually the case. They misjudge their guardrails. Chatbots believe that they are doing everything right, but they have no way of verifying this. What they lack is rationality.
So it looks like there's no solution after all.
For now, programmers keep going like this. It's not as if it doesn't work at all. To a certain extent, they can try to prevent a chatbot from giving unwanted responses. But the system isn't perfect. It makes a lot of mistakes. Still, they can muddle through.
That's not precise.
You can also try to improve the commands of the all or nothing logic, but the gap between the two methods remains.
For artificial intelligence, it is a bridge too far.
This problem is definitively a nightmare for anyone interested in logic.
If you have any thoughts on this, please feel free to leave a comment. We hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.